Have you ever felt the profound shift when you stop reacting to manipulation and simply observe with clarity? What happens when an empath finally sees through a narcissist's illusions and chooses peace over endless emotional battles? Imagine the transformative power of becoming like water, still, reflective, and immovable, in the face of someone who thrives on creating chaos. The silent power of emotional clarity is not loud, flashy, or confrontational. It operates on a deeper frequency, subtle, grounded, and profoundly transformative. A super empath doesn't need to retaliate or waste precious energy trying to outsmart or outmaneuver the narcissist. Instead, they embrace something far more effective. They simply see clearly. Unlike those who fight fire with fire, the super empath becomes water, calm, reflective, and immovable in their truth. Where the narcissist desperately thrives on chaos, confusion, and emotional reaction, the super empath creates a space of stillness. They no longer provide what the narcissist craves most: attention, outrage, and emotional entanglement. Instead, they hold up an invisible mirror, not through accusation or confrontation, but through their presence, a calm, conscious awareness that silently reveals the narcissist's true nature without a single word being spoken. This remarkable clarity doesn't emerge overnight. It comes from deep, often painful internal work. The super empath has journeyed through the fire of challenging emotional experiences. They've shed tears, questioned their reality, attempted to fix broken dynamics, and weathered numerous emotional storms. But eventually, something fundamental shifts within them. They stop trying to make the narcissist understand. They release the hope for apologies, closure, or recognition. Instead, they begin seeing reality without distortion. This is the essence of emotional clarity. This transformation occurs at that pivotal moment when your inner peace becomes non-negotiable and your intuition refuses to be silenced any longer. The empath realizes a profound truth. The narcissist isn't a puzzle to solve, but a mirror to outgrow. They begin recognizing manipulation for what it truly is: a desperate attempt by someone terrified of their own inner emptiness. The narcissist projects, provokes, and pretends to possess power, but beneath this elaborate performance lies nothing more than a fragile ego desperately seeking validation. The enlightened empath no longer feels compelled to fight or expose them. They simply stop feeding the illusion. What truly dismantles a narcissist's control isn't aggression or confrontation, it's indifference. This indifference isn't cold or cruel. Rather, it's deeply rooted in self-respect and self-preservation. The super empath clearly sees the manipulation game and consciously chooses not to play. They respond with silence, not from a place of weakness, but from profound wisdom. They no longer defend themselves because they've realized the narcissist's narrative isn't worth answering or engaging with. This kind of clarity terrifies the narcissist to their core. They cannot manipulate someone who truly sees them. They cannot control someone who remains emotionally centered rather than reactive. They cannot trap someone who no longer seeks or needs their validation. The empath's energy transforms, becoming clean, clear, and untouchable. This is precisely when the narcissist begins to unravel, because their entire identity and sense of self is built upon controlling others. When that control evaporates, they're left facing what they fear most, themselves. The empath becomes an unavoidable mirror the narcissist cannot escape, not by pointing fingers or making accusations, but simply by embodying peace and authenticity, by existing confidently in their truth. The super empath effortlessly reflects everything the narcissist is not: balanced, grounded, and whole. The narcissist may scream, provoke, disappear, and return, but none of these tactics work anymore because emotional clarity functions as the ultimate shield. It's not noisy or dramatic, but it's devastatingly effective. That's the silent power. It doesn't announce itself or engage in battle. It simply sees with clarity. And in that seeing, the narcissist is stripped of their illusions. No war is necessary. The light of truth accomplishes all the work. Detachment is often misunderstood in this process. Many believe it means becoming cold, uncaring, or emotionally numb, but in reality, detachment represents one of the most powerful acts of self-love you can offer yourself. It doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop allowing your emotions to be controlled by someone else, especially someone who thrives on manipulating them for their own benefit. For a super empath, detachment isn't retreating from feelings but rising into emotional self-mastery. The empath has likely spent considerable time navigating the emotional landmines planted by a narcissist, walking on eggshells, constantly explaining themselves, questioning their own perceptions, and attempting to make peace in a conflict they never initiated. The narcissist flourishes in this confusion and emotional chaos. Their entire control mechanism is built on triggering reactions. They push your buttons and you respond. They withdraw affection and you chase after them. They subtly insult you and you scramble to regain their approval. Every emotional reaction you provide feeds their sense of power and control over you. But what happens when the empath begins to detach? Everything shifts dramatically. The reactions the narcissist depends on simply disappear. The manipulative games that once worked so effectively suddenly lose their power. The empath no longer scrambles for validation or approval. They stop trying to fix what was never theirs to repair in the first place. They come to the liberating realization that they don't need to show up for every argument, respond to every guilt trip, or participate in every twisted emotional performance. This realization brings pure liberation. Silence becomes the empath's most powerful tool, cutting through manipulation with surgical precision. Nothing disarms a narcissist more effectively than someone who simply refuses to be baited into emotional reactions. Where there once was anger or pleading, now there exists only quiet strength. No yelling, no emotional breakdowns, just calm, centered withdrawal. The narcissist may initially double down, trying harder to provoke a reaction, but eventually they find themselves shouting into an empty void. And nothing is more destabilizing to someone who craves control than the stark realization that they now have none. Distance becomes the empath's protective shield. Physical space, emotional space, energetic space, the empath no longer grants the narcissist access to their energy or allows their day to be defined by the narcissist's moods and manipulations. This distance isn't created to punish, it's established to protect. It creates a boundary that clearly communicates, I choose peace over performance. And peace, this is the final blow to narcissistic control. The narcissist's world is constructed on turbulence and chaos. They stir up drama simply to feel alive and important. But when the empath no longer engages, the storm gradually dissipates. The peace the empath embodies becomes untouchable, and within that peace, the narcissist is forced to confront a reality they cannot manipulate or control. They can scream, lie, blame, disappear, and reappear, but none of it matters anymore because the empath has stopped playing the game entirely. Detachment represents the empath's evolution and growth. It isn't passive withdrawal, it's a powerful stance. It marks the moment when the empath decides to stop bleeding for people who only love to watch them bleed. It's a silent declaration that states clearly, you no longer have access to my mind, my heart, or my energy. Once this detachment is firmly established, the narcissist finds themselves powerless, not because the empath wanted to fight, but because they simply stopped fighting altogether. This is the true superpower. In this dance between narcissists and empaths, there's one truth that cannot be hidden. Energy doesn't lie. Words can be twisted. Faces can wear convincing masks, and actions can be cleverly disguised as kindness when they're anything but genuine. However, energy, that raw, unfiltered vibrational truth, cannot be falsified or manipulated. Empaths, especially those who have awakened to their full sensitivity, become masters at reading this subtle energetic language. They feel it in the silence between sentences. They sense it behind smiles that never quite reach the eyes. They can enter a room and immediately know when something feels off without a single word being spoken. For a narcissist, this empathic ability is deeply unsettling and threatening. Their entire operation depends on illusion and deception. Their world is carefully constructed on surface-level charm, manipulation, control, and projection. They wear different masks depending on who they're attempting to impress or control in any given moment. But what happens when they encounter an empath who has stepped fully into their power? They face someone who doesn't just hear their carefully crafted words but sees straight through their elaborate masks to the truth beneath. The empowered empath doesn't need tangible proof or evidence. They directly feel the disconnect between what the narcissist says and what they actually mean. That energetic dissonance rings loud and clear to someone attuned to the frequency of truth. This remarkable ability makes the empath incredibly threatening to the narcissist, not because the empath attacks or publicly exposes them, but because their mere presence becomes a form of exposure. When you cannot hide your true nature from someone, it creates profound discomfort, especially for someone whose entire identity depends on maintaining a false image. As we explore deeper into this dynamic in the next section, we'll discover how narcissists respond when they realize they're truly seen, and why the empath's greatest power lies not in confrontation, but in their unwavering commitment to their own truth and healing journey. As we've seen, the empowered empath's ability to perceive energetic truth creates a profound shift in the narcissist-empath dynamic. But what happens when this awareness transforms into an unbreakable mirror of truth? The empath's quiet awareness becomes a powerful mirror, one the narcissist never asked to look into, yet cannot escape. With each attempt to manipulate, gaslight, or perform their carefully crafted persona, the narcissist feels that subtle, unnerving gaze that sees too deeply into their facade. The empath doesn't flinch, doesn't argue, doesn't get pulled into the drama or emotional chaos. They simply observe with clear-eyed awareness, and remarkably, this calm observation alone begins to dismantle the narcissist's entire power structure. What truly breaks the narcissist's control isn't confrontation but contrast. The empath's energy carries an unmistakable authenticity that radiates peace, emotional depth, and genuine truth. The narcissist, by stark comparison, harbors an inner emptiness, driven primarily by ego, fear, and deep-seated insecurity. When they stand in the presence of someone who feels genuinely whole and centered, their own internal fragmentation becomes unbearably apparent. It's not what the empath says that creates this discomfort, it's who they are at their core. Their very presence becomes the silent confrontation, a living reminder of everything the narcissist pretends to be but isn't. Yet importantly, the empath doesn't need to actively expose anyone or prove anything. Their truth resonates in their energy. Their vibration speaks volumes more clearly than accusations ever could. This is precisely why energy never lies. It cannot be manipulated or falsified like words and actions. Have you ever noticed how you can sense when someone's words don't match their energy? The empath doesn't need to catch the narcissist in verbal contradictions. They already intuitively feel the profound disconnect between the false self, the narcissist presence, and the real self they try so desperately to bury. This energetic contrast eventually forces the narcissist to confront their own emptiness, not through confrontation or verbal exchanges, but through the silent, unwavering presence of someone who clearly sees the truth and simply refuses to participate in the illusion any longer. Self-mastery represents the ultimate power in this dynamic, the ability to remain firmly grounded in your truth regardless of what emotional storms surrounds you. While the narcissist actively seeks to create chaos, provoke emotional reactions, and pull others into the toxic cycle, the super empath pursues something entirely different: inner order and peace. This inner stability, calm, clear, and unwavering, ultimately dismantles the narcissist's manipulative games, not through confrontation, but through stillness. Not by striking back, but by rising above the conflict entirely. The narcissist operates like a skilled puppeteer, constantly testing boundaries, baiting reactions, and feeding on emotional drama. They strategically throw emotional grenades to keep the empath off balance and vulnerable. What they truly want is for the empath to react emotionally, to lash out in anger, to break down in tears, to desperately seek resolution, because within those reactions, they regain control and power, But when the empath steps fully into self-mastery, they no longer surrender to these emotional triggers. They stop being the puppet and become the observer instead. They no longer feel compelled to prove themselves, defend their reality, or retaliate against attacks. They simply remain centered in their truth. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It requires time, deep healing, and an unwavering commitment to self-awareness. But once the empath reaches this level of emotional mastery, the narcissist begins to lose every bit of leverage they once possessed. The emotional buttons no longer function as intended. The manufactured chaos no longer pulls the empath into its vortex. There is no war left to fight because one side consciously refuses to participate. And in this refusal, the entire power structure collapses. Self-mastery isn't silence born from fear or intimidation. It's silence that emerges from inner strength and clarity. It's choosing peace over revenge. It's the remarkable ability to stand firmly in the presence of manipulation and remain emotionally unmoved. The empowered empath doesn't suppress their emotions. Rather, they transform them. They've learned through experience that reacting emotionally only provides the narcissist with more ammunition for future manipulation. Instead, they channel that emotional energy towards strengthening their boundaries, deepening their self-awareness, and preserving their inner sanctuary of peace. The narcissist fundamentally depends on creating imbalance in relationships. They need their target to remain confused, uncertain, or emotionally desperate. But self-mastery brings precisely the opposite conditions: balance, clarity, and emotional sovereignty. The empath gradually becomes immune to guilt trips, resistant to gaslighting, and no longer susceptible to the seductive cycle of emotional highs and lows that once kept him trapped. They've learned to soothe their own pain, validate their own worth, and walk away from chaos without looking back or second-guessing their decision. To the narcissist, this represents complete defeat. They don't just lose control over the empath, they lose their audience entirely. The game ends not with an explosive confrontation, but with silence, with genuine disinterest, with complete non-engagement. Nothing proves more devastating to someone who thrives on attention and emotional reaction than being met with calm indifference from someone they once controlled so effectively. What makes self-mastery particularly powerful is that it doesn't seek to destroy anyone else. It only seeks to protect and nurture inner peace. And that peace becomes unshakable precisely because it comes from within rather than depending on external validation or circumstances. The empath no longer needs to be right or understood by others. They've stopped fighting for the narcissist to truly see them. Instead, they've chosen the more powerful path of fully seeing and accepting themselves. This represents the quiet revolution, not fighting back against manipulation, but standing tall in your truth, not retaliating against attacks, but rising above the entire dynamic. And in doing so, the empath dismantles the narcissist's toxic game piece by piece, without a word, without a war, simply by refusing to be pulled into the chaos ever again. Narcissists don't merely crave attention, they depend on it for their very sense of self. Their entire identity is constructed upon the emotional reactions they can provoke from others. Whether it's admiration, fear, confusion, or anger, every emotional response feeds their fragile ego and sense of importance. They meticulously choreograph emotional dances where they lead and expect others to follow, constantly adjusting their tactics to keep their audience engaged and responsive. But what happens in that pivotal moment when the empath stops dancing emotionally, mentally, and energetically? The music begins to fade, and without that performance, the narcissist finds themselves standing in uncomfortable silence, suddenly powerless and exposed for who they truly are. For a considerable time, the empath may have felt trapped in this exhausting dance. They were constantly adapting, adjusting, trying desperately to make the relationship work, hoping that enough love, kindness, or understanding could somehow heal the deep wounds within the narcissist. They were repeatedly pulled in by guilt, confused by gaslighting and false apologies, and destabilized by unpredictable hot and cold behavior. The narcissist controlled the emotional music, creating dramatic highs and devastating lows, offering love and then sudden punishment, and the empath kept moving in response, trying earnestly to bring harmony to a rhythm that was specifically designed to break their spirit. But every empath eventually reaches a profound moment of awakening, a moment when they realize they aren't broken, they're being systematically used. When they finally understand that no matter how gracefully they move or how much they accommodate, the music will always shift to serve the narcissist's agenda. It's in this moment of painful clarity that the empath makes their most powerful decision: to stop dancing altogether. Not to fight, not to prove anything, but simply to stop feeding the manipulative game with their precious energy. This departure isn't always physical at first. It begins emotionally. The empath detaches from the desperate need to be seen or understood by the narcissist. They stop searching for closure or validation. They stop internalizing blame for problems they didn't create. They begin to recognize manipulation in real time as it happens, and they consciously choose not to engage with it anymore. Then comes the mental shift. The endless overthinking, the analyzing of conversations, the constant replaying of conflicts, it all gradually quiets down. The empath no longer tries to decode the narcissist's contradictory messages or behavior. They accept the liberating truth that some puzzles are meant to remain unsolved. And that's perfectly okay. Finally, the energetic break occurs. The empath withdraws their presence, their emotional labor, their light and vitality. This is the moment the narcissist feels the loss most acutely, because what they once controlled has now become free. What they once dimmed now shines brightly without their interference. The silence becomes deafening, not for the empath who has found peace, but for the narcissist who has lost their source of narcissistic supply. The performance is over, and with no one left to impress or manipulate, the narcissist is left alone to face the emptiness within themselves. The empath's absence becomes louder than any argument could have been. Their peace, their distance, their complete refusal to play the game, it all sends a message stronger than words ever could. You no longer have power here. And in that profound silence, the narcissist's carefully constructed illusion of control completely collapses. When the empath walks away completely, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, the narcissist loses their primary source of narcissistic supply. The music stops, the stage goes dark, and the person they once choreographed like a puppet now stands free, grounded in self-respect and unshakably whole in their being. The truth is revealed: the narcissist's power was never genuinely real. It was borrowed, taken from the empath's energy, attention, and emotional reactions. And once the empath stops dancing to their manipulative tune, the music simply dies away. In the quiet strength of a super empath lies a power that doesn't need to shout, fight, or prove itself to anyone. It simply exists in its truth. While the narcissist thrives on illusion, manipulation, and control, the super empath rises by stepping out of the toxic game entirely. This transformative journey isn't about revenge or retribution. It's not about defeating or punishing the narcissist. It's about reclaiming your authentic self and your inner peace. When the empath stops reacting, stops explaining, stops dancing to a tune that was never truly theirs, the narcissist loses the only weapon they ever possessed: their influence over the empath's emotional state. And in that powerful moment of liberation, the empath doesn't just walk away. They ascend to a higher level of consciousness and self-awareness. No words are needed, no closure from the narcissist is required, because the real closure comes from within, knowing who you truly are, protecting your hard-won peace, and refusing to be pulled into chaos ever again. That's the silent revolution. That's how a super empath transcends narcissistic control without saying a single word, through the power of presence, clarity, and unwavering self-respect. If this exploration of emotional clarity and empathic power resonated with you, please consider subscribing to our channel for more insights on emotional healing, personal growth, and authentic living. Your journey toward greater awareness and inner peace matters, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Hit that subscribe button now and join our community of truth seekers committed to living with clarity and purpose.